You're an agribusiness executive navigating an increasingly competitive market while trying to grow your company. Mergers and acquisitions are pitched as an accelerant to growth, but many M&A deals destroy more value than they create. Welcome to the Pacesetter Pod, where we explore and reveal the perspectives, insights, and approaches for successful mergers and acquisitions. Here's your host, the Integration Pacesetter, Joe Mosier.
Hello and welcome to the only show on the internet dedicated to helping the leaders of small to middle market food and agribusinesses deliver great results through better strategy execution. This is the Pacesetter Pod, and I'm your host, Joe Mosier. I've had a lot of experiences recently, both in the last couple weeks and over the last year, with clients and with companies that I'm familiar with really struggling through the process of succession planning. And this has shown up in a lot of different ways. You know, in the context of a mid-sized regional commodity handler, grain handler that was shifting to a new operating model, which is going to require some bigger and different leadership profiles and characteristics and performance, again, within the facility operations space, and really thinking about, okay, how healthy is our pipeline? You know, can we staff these roles now, but also how would we staff these roles in the future? What does our bench look like? You know, working with and talking to an agency that had been bought by a private equity firm was largely still being managed locally. A lot of the back office processes had been moved to a platform solution, but the customer facing on the grounds, local business development and customer service was still held by the agency. But they were thinking about, you know, how does the senior management of that group eventually step away? And how is that local management and leadership backfilled? And they're really struggling with it. And then also working recently with a company in the ag supply chain that not just needed to think about succession planning at the top of the house, but was also looking at a major generational transition with someone who'd been in the business for a long time stepping away. And what does that look like, not just for that individual's role, but in all the roles that that individual oversaw and supported and developed throughout the years. And so this issue of succession planning and the problems and challenges that it presents show up everywhere. And there's just so many triggers that bring about the need for good succession planning. It's not just retirements, though that's what people often think of. You know, it could be we just need to prepare for the fact that our people are going to move around if you're in a mid-size or larger organization. Could be just a good, rigorous plan to say we want to make sure that we can sustain operations of our business even during normal times in the event that there's a move. Succession planning is a great way to engage your people because it results in some interesting development plans and opportunities for key talent. I've seen companies that need to think about succession planning because they're going through periods of just rapid expansion and growth. And as they go through that growth, the business demands evolve. And while they evolve, they also increase. And so your leadership needs are radically different. And then, of course, my favorite topic is just executing a merger or acquisition. And for folks executing M&A, when you think about it, in the back end of this, you're going to be managing a whole new business. And so what does the pipeline for future leadership look like, and what do you need to do to get ready? And so while there's a lot of different cases that we've seen succession planning come up as a pressing need, a lot of different ways that it can trigger that need, there's also a lot of shortcomings and things that get in the way of good and really effective succession planning. And it's things like basic self-inflicted wounds and self-imposed barriers that make it hard to start or result in starting too late. I've seen companies consistently over-design their approach, over-engineer the way they're going to do succession planning. And they spend so much time managing the complexity of their own process that they do very little to actually move the business forward. And then even once those companies are into the process, there's a lot of common pitfalls and traps that companies fall into, which prevent them from actually doing it well and seeing the value from the activity. And so that's what I'd like to dedicate today's episode to, succession planning. It's applicable to companies across the spectrum, whether you're an established incumbent, whether you're a scrappy startup, whether you're somewhere in between, however you characterize your business, succession planning is a huge value-add endeavor, very complex and important for you to be thinking about. Now, one quick note though, for today's purposes, we're going to be talking about succession planning largely for key roles, but not necessarily for the top job. And by top job, you know, president, CEO, owner, those types of transitions. And the reason I want to call it out is because that's a whole other challenge. Because not just in terms of are you trying to replace the performance and the presence and the leadership in the company, but you have potential ownership and company equity issues. You have board considerations. You need to manage the expectations of lenders and investors. So much of what we talk about today is going to be relevant for those top of the house transitions, but what we talk about won't be complete in the context of turning over and transitioning a new CEO or ownership. So with that said, let's jump in. So the first thing I want to touch on is the need for continuity and stability in businesses is very clear. Nobody likes surprises. There's very rarely positive surprises. And one of the things we know we can do to keep surprises out of our business is to make sure from a talent perspective, we've got a stable outlook on the people we have now and the people that are coming up through the ranks that would likely replace them one day. So what are the barriers to effective succession planning? There's tons of points of friction here. And I could probably dedicate the whole episode to listing them all, but I don't think a full inventory is all that additive. So let's just hit the high notes. Perhaps the biggest mistake that I see companies make is assuming that when the time and the need for succession planning arises, they'll have time to cover it. And this assumption fails on two counts. One, succession planning isn't episodic. It's an ongoing effort and investment. It's something you commit to over time and constantly looking at what are your leadership needs? What's your leadership readiness? What's the pipeline? Your business needs aren't static. Your succession planning needs won't be either. And so again, the first way this fails is that people thinking it's episodic. Hey, when we think we have a need, we'll go ahead and just do it and then we'll be done. False. The second issue is that the moment you realize that you really need succession planning, you're probably too late or you're already getting started too late. So while good succession planning involves that long-term planning horizon, which results in a lot of investment in people along the way, if you wait until a need is within sight, it's like you've bought a position in the market and you're trying to time the market for your sell or for your exit. And investors, your financial planner, everybody will tell you trying to time the market rarely works out well. And so again, that's not a trap you want to fall into. If you're not prepared in advance to make important talent decisions, that when that urgency then suddenly confronts you, you're likely to stumble into a pretty costly mistake. The second self-inflicted wound here is that the lens that you're looking through really impacts the quality of your succession planning. And so what do I mean by that? It's an especially common mistake to operate in silos when you're building your plan for backfilling a role. And particularly when that role, it maybe is in a silo, but it operates at scale. So what do I mean by that? Let's think about potential successors for your chief financial officer, your CFO. What many companies do is when they start looking at what are they going to do to backfill a CFO should there be a transition in the future, they look within their accounting and finance ranks. And that's great. The problem is they often only talk to people in the accounting and finance ranks. So it's the CFO, it's the senior controller, it's the FP&A lead. It's those kinds of folks that are opining on, okay, who might be successors in the future for our bigger jobs. And when you do that, when you only look at readiness through a functional lens, you're going to miss things. This person needs to understand not just the numbers and the financial ratios of your business. They need to also know how the product flows through the system. They need to know how value is created, how your business operates within the supply chain. What's the relationships with suppliers and customers? You think about, can this person be successful as the face of the company to the board, to the lenders, to other investors that you might have? And so that's where you need to involve also non-functional, non-finance people that interact with this role on a regular basis and can actually provide a point of view on what makes for a successful person in that role. You need their input as well. And the same thing could go for, let's say, a VP of operations. You don't only want to look at who has execution chops within the plant. Now, knowing how to run a plant efficiently, knowing how to get the maximum capacity out of the equipment, maximum utilization out of people, maintain quality and volume, that's all really, really important. But you also need to make sure that you're looking at people who can set a tone of partnership with the sales organization, where all that demand is created. You don't want people who just know how to meet demand. You need to understand where the demand creation comes from. Ideally, you'd like someone who understands the product innovation cycles and the role that operations has in bringing new value through new products to market. And maybe you also probably want someone who's able to articulate the value of CapEx investments and say, here's how putting money into our existing infrastructure that really advances our operational goals is going to tie to organizational objectives as well. We're not talking about swapping people across functional lines. I'm not talking about putting a plant manager in the CFO spot or putting a sales rep as the VP ops. But the conversations that you have to evaluate talent need to breach these functional boundaries. The last barrier that I want to mention is the tendency that I've seen clients to have to over-design and over-engineer their succession planning approach. Too many companies work too hard for too long just to get way too granular on the degrees of talent readiness. And so they're trying to get down to just a level of precision that frankly is you've gone far past the point of diminishing returns, but it's also not useful at that point. I've also seen people who apply the process way too deep in the organization or way too wide. So the challenge when you're designing or adopting or implementing your succession planning process is to take a pragmatic approach, staying focused on where the biggest impacts are going to be felt, and doing it in a reasonable way. So if you create tools that are overweight or overweight on detailed precision, or you say, we need to have better succession planning. So now we want to have a successor for every single role in our company. Either one of those are going to make you buckle under the weight of your own work, and you're not going to be any better off than you were when you started.
Poorly executed mergers and acquisitions destroy more value than they create. They can set your company back years. To defend your firm's position in the marketplace, you need access to the leading practices that unlock the greater potential of your people, processes, and systems. If you are undertaking a company transformation or pursuing an acquisition as a vehicle to grow, set up a call with Joe by visiting www.moshercg.com.
And so that's a nice segue into my second point today, which is really resisting that urge to over-engineer your process. Now, I don't remember exactly where I first was exposed to this, and so I can't cite the source, but I want to make it clear that this process I'm going to talk about is not something that I designed. It's something I've maybe refined and made it more applicable to the clients that we work with. But again, it's not mine. It's a process I've used many times and it works. So when you're looking at the pipeline of potential successors for a role, and we could pick whatever role that might be. It could be your senior, VP of merchandising, could be your director of product development, could be your chief agronomist, whatever that might be. When you're looking at the pipeline of those potential successors and assuming that you're being proactive and asking this question before the position is empty, so that's one of my assumptions, you look at individuals and you determine if they fall into one of three buckets or three categories, let's say. Ready now, ready soon, or ready later. It's really that simple. But let's look a little bit further under the hood here for a moment. Let's define the terms. Ready now is a category that's reserved for people that you could see conceivably stepping into a role and being successful in the very near term, which I define as any time in the next 12 months. So they may need some development. They probably need some training. They're definitely going to need some support. But all that development and training support is going to be more confirmatory than anything else. Here's something you need to know, though. You rarely will have any real ready now people, because if you had a bunch of ready now candidates or even one ready now candidate, you probably wouldn't be spending time talking about succession planning for that role in the first place. And so the mere fact that you say we need to talk about succession planning always tells me, when I hear that from a client, always tells me, okay, there's nobody that they can obviously hand the keys to today. Maybe it's not 10 years away, but it's definitely not in the near term. It's unlikely to be in the next 12 months, because if it was, you'd have natural confidence and you wouldn't see this as a big risk. Ready now candidates, when you have them, are usually well known to leadership. And even if it's not explicit, there's often an understanding that this person or maybe a couple of people are the ones that are standing in line for that next big spot that might open up. So the goal is to get more people moved into the ready now category. But in this process, rarely is there a bunch of people you're going to put on there in that bucket right out of the gates. So the next category is ready soon. And so if ready now is for people that are ready in the next 12 months, Ready soon is for those individuals that could conceivably be ready to move into the role sometime between 12 months to 36 months into the future, meaning it's going to take 1 to 3 years of development to get them ready. And you might not have a lot of names here either, but you're likely to have more than the ready now category. And if when you put those names in, it's going to give you a short list of people that you can develop intentional plans for to help them improve their readiness. Folks where you're saying, okay, if we actually believe that they can be ready in 1 to 3 years, what does that mean to get them ready? So that's a useful way to look at it. And then finally, the ready later category. And the ready later is frankly, it's where I get the most energy from. It's more speculative in nature. When you're thinking about people that's more than 3 years, maybe more than 5 years out into the future, that they can move into a bigger job or the specific key role that you're talking about, now you're talking about that kind of that raw or maybe that untested, unproven talent that's sitting within the organization that's going to need multiple years of development. Yeah, they're not viable candidates now, but it's people you've already seen those green shoots of performance, whether it's just a real enterprising attitude around how they go out and earn sales. Maybe it's someone who just has that natural leadership presence to go into a tough situation with a customer, find a solution, organize a team around it, and get back to work. Maybe it's the people that just have that moxie to walk into a facility with an entrenched team that's maybe struggling and has their own hierarchy and their own ways of doing things, and they're in need of change, but they've chewed up the last 3 or 4 people that have tried to go in there and turn that plan around. And this person can go in and they got the job done. They built rapport, they built trust, they demonstrated some candor, and they're seeing results. So maybe they're not your COO today, but you've seen those kind of green shoots that tell you, okay, this is somebody that is the future. It's pretty far afield. We don't know exactly what their runway is. We don't know exactly where they land, but we know that those are some of our key people we need to spend time on. So again, the framework is as simple as that. Ready now, ready soon, ready later. To support this, we've put together a basic template that we follow to help facilitate the discussions with our clients. And the template helps us to create alignment among the team that's doing the work. It helps to identify what are the major components of individual action plans to support their development as part of succession planning. But we're not going to go through those details today. It'd be too much for this episode. And frankly, not everybody is ready to hear it. But if you're listening today and you would like to hear more about that, or if you simply want to get access to the tools, just go to our website, www.mosercg.com, set up a call, and we'll be happy to pass along whatever you need to get you started, no charge at all. So while we won't cover it today, don't feel like that's the end of our support. We'd be happy to walk you through it and provide you the resources that you need. And so now we've talked about things that companies can do that put themselves into a tough spot with succession planning, starting too late, assuming you have enough time, whatever it might be. And we've talked about what a simple approach to this process looks like. And so that brings us to the final point. Now it's the pitfalls that companies, including you, are likely to fall into once you're into the process. So in a single word, I would say that most of the pain that follows in the succession planning process is born out of a desire for something, and that is alignment. And more specifically, perfect alignment. It completely stalls progress. What do I mean by that? The first thing you need to think about here is that you don't need 100% alignment to have someone named in the pipeline at the ready soon, ready now, ready later levels. It's not necessary. What you need is if a name does sit there, if a name is on the succession plan, even if it's a bit controversial, even if it generates more friction than value putting their name there, if there is someone in the company in a position of authority, and that's really important here, a person in a position of authority who's willing to do the work to help them, a person who believes in them, that's enough for now. Because again, remember, your succession planning is not episodic. It's not just happening now. You're putting names on paper, and that's suddenly the plan for the future, and it's unchanging, and that's who the next person is going to be at an XYZ role. It's not it at all. It's a point-in-time view on talent. And if you have somebody near the top of the house who says, no, I think this person has it. They need some help. Let's see what they're made of. That's enough. Now, if there's a name on that paper and it makes people nervous and there's no champion in the room, there's no one who's willing to do the work, unless you have some reason to believe that that person's going to grow and mature into the ideal candidate on their own, just go ahead and take them off the list. So again, don't seek perfect alignment. Ensure that if there is dissent, if there's material significant dissent and pushback about someone's name in that list, make sure there's at least someone there who's willing to fight for them, who's willing to put the time in. And if somebody's willing to commit to that, there's no harm in keeping them on the list. Second, resist the urge to indulge the naysayers. You don't need to indulge them, you need to obligate them. So I've sat in many sessions where I've heard almost verbatim, someone will stand up, maybe they pound their fist and they say, I will never support Bob for that role. Doesn't matter what the role is, doesn't actually matter what the name is. And then what happens is that person says that. They draw that line in the sand. There is nothing you can do to convince me that that person could ever be in that role. And you can put their name down now, but I will never sign off on them being in that position. What happens is all the supporters in the room, all the people that were really bullish on the individual who wanted their name on the paper, they're going to suddenly launch into a full-scale campaign on that person's behalf. Why they're great for the role, why they've shown the potential to succeed, and basically why the dissenter is wrong. A better approach is to simply ask that dissenter why they have such strong feelings, and then ask them to provide concrete examples to support their conclusion. This is where you need to test your own biases. We all have people who they think like us, they react like us, they have similar experiences, whatever it might be. For whatever reason, we're very bullish on certain people in the company, and our instincts may be right, but they're not always complete. And so when somebody has a strong reaction and says they will not support somebody, your job is not to try to convince them that they're wrong. Your job is to listen about why they might be right and engage them, challenge them, but obligate them to build their case. We all know you need to explain your thinking if you want to add someone to the list. Obviously, you wouldn't say, no, I think Bob's perfect for that role, and then wouldn't explain why he belongs on the list. No one would ever accept that. But for some reason, we overlook the obvious fact that you should be similarly obligated to explain why Bob doesn't belong there. The naysayer carries the same burden as everybody else. And so don't fall into the trap of trying to prove why they belong. Expect people who dissent to prove why they don't. And then finally, don't fall into the trap of getting too wrapped up in surgical precision about whether someone belongs in the ready soon or ready later bucket. I mean, for me, this is a sign that the process is working. People are really into it when they've gotten past the names and they know what ready now, ready soon, ready later means, and they're chewing through it, and then suddenly they get stuck on, I think Betty's ready soon. I think she's ready later. It's going to take 5 years. No, we can get her ready in 2 years. That's actually a sign of success. They're really engaged in the process. But the problem is the determination of ready soon, ready later. Again, it presumes that you're doing this one point in time activity. Both ready soon and ready later are future focused. Both are going to need to be revisited on an ongoing basis. Both are going to require some time for the individual that you're discussing to grow and to develop and to prove that they have the chops for the role. So if you get stuck here and you feel like you can't get people comfortable around what category they land in, here's the trick I use. I just ask myself, and I ask everyone else in the process, what would need to happen for us to believe that Betty's ready in 3 years? That's it. So if someone's saying, no, I think she's ready, someone says, I think she's ready soon, someone says ready later, what would have to be true for us to say she's ready 3 years from now? The answer is going to be really revealing. It's not only going to detail out what the development plan needs to look like. She's going to need to work in this type of project. She's going to need to have these kinds of experiences. She's going to need to do X, Y, Z. It's going to detail out the development plan. But then once the development plan is actually detailed out and you're all looking at it together, you can look at it and say, yeah, is that even reasonable to accomplish within 3 years? Or is it a slam dunk? Of course you can do that in less than 3 years. So sometimes this kind of bickering or negotiation back and forth about ready soon, ready later, comes down to misalignment around what does the action plan need to look like. And once you get the action plans out, at least rough draft, bar napkin bullet points, usually it becomes pretty clear where they need to land. And you know what? If you still can't decide, just vote. Just put their name somewhere. You're going to look at this list on an ongoing basis, and you can refine it over time. And sorry, there's one last bonus comment that I want to leave you with here as we wrap up. For goodness sakes, when you're done with this when you've done this first review, this first cycle of the process, don't tell people that their name was on the list. Don't tell people that they're not on the list. I don't even like to share with people that there is a list. It's just a distraction. It's high value for leadership and pure distraction for everybody else in the organization. Businesses change, demand's going to evolve, people are going to come and go, and those circumstances are going to impact the decisions that you would make. If you tell someone that they're on the list, they're going to expect to stay on the list. And suddenly what was a high-performing individual who's just having a great time doing their job, all of a sudden they're going to start wanting to know, what can they do to move up? When might a move be coming? Who am I competing with? It's all distraction. When what they need to be doing is doing well in their job, not worrying about the dang list. And similarly, if someone learns that they're not on the list, this is incredibly disengaging. And sure, there's a chance that it might raise their performance. They might have this bold act of defiance to prove you wrong by being the best employee you ever had. And that'd be great if that happened. But what's far more likely, frankly, probably almost assured to happen, is they're going to have a performance dip, or they're going to choose to leave. It's not going to be additive to your organization. Over time, as you do cycles of this, and I generally recommend 2 times a year, looking at your pipeline for key roles, names are going to be added, names are going to be dropped, names are going to move, and it's all sensitive information. And unless you're actually pulling the trigger and getting ready to move someone into a new position, I frankly don't see the value in sharing any of the details. It is 100% risk and no reward. So that's it for today. If I was successful, you have a better idea of how and when to get started with succession planning. You've got an idea about a simpler way to go about it. And I've given you a trail of breadcrumbs to help you avoid stepping on some of the major landmines along the way. There's so much more that we could have talked about, though. So I'll reiterate my offer. If this is something you're thinking about for your business, or you're in the midst of or have tried and failed with succession planning and you want to give another crack at it, just reach out and let's talk. I'd love the chance to share my thoughts and offer whatever resources I can to help you get moving. Thank you, as always, for tuning into the Pacesetter Pod today. Before you go, be sure to like and subscribe to the episode or to the podcast. We don't want you to miss any of the upcoming shows. Please, of course, share our podcast with others that you believe would benefit from the content. As always, you can get in touch with me, Joe Mosier, on LinkedIn, or by setting up a call from our website at www.mosiercg.com. Best of luck, as always, in your growth ambitions. Keep killing it out there. Thank you for listening, and have a safe day.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.